Good morning, Baltimore. It is Thursday, July 30th. Welcome to the latest episode of the Early Birds podcast. I am not Matt Wyrick. I'm your host today, Sam Cohn, filling in for Matt alongside columnist extraordinaire Josh Tolentino. Ravens camp kicked off on Wednesday. Josh, you pulled a little bit of double duty. We were together at training camp, and then you got out of there and caught the end of that Orioles game. Crazy 12 innings. Orioles like to keep fans on the edge of their seats at all times, and I just like to keep things interesting. How are you feeling?
A lot going on, Sam. At one point during this game that you're referencing, they were losing 7-0, and that was after losing 14-0 the previous night. They end up winning 10-9. But guess what, Sam? We are here to celebrate Christmas.
Christmas in July.
Joking. Yeah, exactly. We are here to celebrate and just really dive into everything that we heard, that we saw at Ravens training camp, the equivalent of Christmas if you are a Ravens football fan, because here it is. Jesse Minter embarks on his era, kicking off practice. It was a short one, 1 hour and 23 minutes is what I clocked Jesse Minter's practice at, and that's including stretch periods. So really, they were only practicing for about an hour. So that was a noticeable change. Jesse Minter did say that he wants to dial up the intensity and that lengths will vary as practices go on. But the new era is officially here. As John Harbaugh embarks in West Virginia for the start of Giants training camp, here's Jesse Minter, Lamar Jackson, and the entire crew out here in Owings Mills. A lot to dive into from today. How are you feeling, Sam, after, again, it was like unwrapping our presents, right? We're observing all the players come onto the field.
I'm good. It was fun to get back out there. Like you said, shorter practices. I think the symbiotic relationship of it all, they're practicing earlier over the next month. Throughout August, they'll be practicing at 10, 11 in the morning, and obviously, so much changes with the new regime. We're going to be covering everything that feels, looks, and is different about Jesse Minter's first training camp in Baltimore. Today, though, I want to focus on just some major takeaways from day one of training camp, and we're going to go through a couple superlatives for pre-camp, the start of camp. Just obviously, we're only a day into seeing these guys out on the field, but some superlatives, sort of where we're at, and a little bit of looking ahead. But obviously, the headline coming out of the first day of training camp is Nnamdi Madubuike, the player who it's been 10 months since he's spoken. He did not speak again today. Hopeful that maybe that might happen over the next few days. But he came off the physically unable to perform list, and he was out there for practice. I think he was only out there for about 20 to 30 minutes. He went through stretching with his teammates. Nnamdi was then off on a side field doing some extra workouts. And then I remember I turned to you at one point and realized that Nnamdi had reposted on Instagram the video that the Ravens posted of him out there, indicating that he had gone back inside. So he was only there for about a third of practice. He didn't do a whole lot. But Josh, just what did you see about Nnamdi? What was it like to see him back out there today?
Yeah, let's give our viewers and listeners even more perspective and insight into what we saw and heard, Sam. And I'm going to rewind it back to the start of practice. So players are running onto the field, and from the entrance point, we actually enter from the opposite side of the facility. So you and I both noticed that players were running onto the field, and they allow a select group of kids, about a couple dozen kids, through their part of the organization's youth initiatives, to observe practice and also welcome the players onto the field. So a lot of screaming going on in that corner. So you and I make our way over there. And, as we're recording, most of the players had already come out for the stretch period. We saw Lamar was already out. That's kind of like the big ticket item of being in that line, in that tunnel as they're coming on to the field. And, Derrick Henry, we see Derrick Henry about to come through. And right before Derrick runs out, we actually hear a child nearby us, and he says, "I want to see Nnamdi." And you and I both looked at each other, and I think
we want to see him
comment,
too.
Yeah, exactly. It was like we'd all love to see Nnamdi. Well, so Derrick runs out on the field, and obviously he commands all the types of attention. A future Hall of Fame running back, still doing it at his age. Well deserved. And you know what? So Nnamdi picks Derrick Henry as almost his running mate to shield him because he grabbed all the attention, and Nnamdi snuck on through. Obviously, we did notice him there at the end and catch some of that tail end, making his way over to the stretch period. But shortly after, I'm talking moments after, the team puts out a release, and they put out on Twitter, all their social feeds, that Nnamdi has been activated off the PUP list. We observed his participation in practice, which you described as about 30% of practice, working off to the side fields with a trainer. But Sam, I don't care how much he practiced. I don't care, if he kicked his feet up, whistle blew and he ran a couple sprints or jogs down the sideline. The fact that Nnamdi Madubuike was back in full uniform on the practice field at Owings Mills on July 29th, over a month and a half before the Ravens start their season at Indianapolis, that is the most encouraging sign that you are going to get from at any point, that whatever happens over this next 5-6 weeks leading up to the start of the season. The fact that Nnamdi Madubuike, the force that is Nnamdi Madubuike, a top 5 NFL defensive lineman, interior lineman at his best, was back on the field today. Could not ask for more. Nnamdi, a dominant 2023 season. He led all of the NFL interior defensive linemen with 13 sacks. He had 6.5 sacks last season. I'm sorry, the season following that, and 2 sacks last year at the time of his injury, the neck injury that has sidelined him since week 2 of last season. He was the team's leader in pressures over those 2 games. So it could not be overstated how much his return means to this defense. And certainly, some players are a little hesitant in how they are answering our questions about Nnamdi, but you can just tell the energy, and obviously it being the first day of training camp and all the stars back on the field. But for Nnamdi to run out there could not be more encouraged if you're a Ravens fan.
Without a doubt, you start to feel a little bit of the energy shift. Guys talked about just like how much it means to have him out there. They talk about him in the same way that they talk about what it's like to have Lamar on the field or Kyle Hamilton on the field. Like, he just brings that energy. He's just that kind of guy. So yeah, worth acknowledging. Like, we have not seen him play for 10 months. As we've talked several times on this podcast, the Ravens brass, coaches, whomever, have given next to no real tangible update about his availability. He had surgery in April. It sounds like since that surgery, there has been relative optimism for his availability for this season at some point. We are still unsure. All we really learned on the first day of training camp is Jesse Minter said, quote unquote, positive things to come with him. And based on some of the things he said, talking about wanting to protect the player in terms of his health, because there was a time where we thought this could potentially end his career. Neck injuries are no joke. So much of like what we heard today makes me think, okay, they're going to ramp him up, and it sounds like they feel pretty strongly that he has a real chance to be ready to play this season. But based on the way Jesse answered that one question, saying like, we want to be careful to protect the player, we're going to kind of take this slow, felt to me like he was insinuating he could be ready this season, but probably not for week 1. Plays such a violent position. Obviously has played it for so much of his career at such a high level. That's not someone, and coming off an injury like that, someone you just want to throw back into the interior defensive line, into the trenches, and expect him to play at an all-pro level. So if you're the Ravens, you're hoping that he can contribute at some point this season in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and again, I referenced the start of the season to point out just how much time there is. Nnamdi, in his case, he can take all the time he needs due to the severity of that injury. As you pointed out, there was a very realistic point in time where we wondered if we would get to see Nnamdi Madubuike back on a football field again. And just to further emphasize how big of an impact this is to have Nnamdi back on the practice field. Again, we'll see exactly when and where his full return to game-like feel and being a contributor takes, and at what point, maybe later in the season, as you alluded to. But let's just list off some of the names that played defensive line from last year. We've got Josh Tupou. Do you remember Josh Tupou, Sam?
Of course.
Josh Tupou. We got Aeneas Peebles, who actually has been with Nnamdi's absence, has actually been stepping up in my
A lot of
opinion.
young guys got
Brent,
a lot of tick. Yeah, go ahead.
a lot of young guys, a lot of guys that you don't know about. CJ Okoye, who just started playing football a few years ago. Brent Urban, John Jenkins, at their age, playing significant snaps to make up for Nnamdi's loss. So again, to go from that to the potential of Nnamdi coming back with Travis Jones. Things are looking brighter for this defense, and that domino effect it has on the rest of the unit, from the edges, with Trey Hendrickson leading that group, and then for them to be able to collapse the pocket, and for the secondary to do their job under Jesse Minter. Just a lot of things to like, and again, they're going to take it slow and slow play it, and Kyle Hamilton, we asked about him. We asked Kyle about Nnamdi multiple times. I think 3-4 questions. At one point, he referenced HIPAA, in an inaccurate way. Just just not talking too much there on that topic. But
they're not going to say anything. Lamar said something to the effect of 100% it's great to have him out there. Wait. I'm not saying he's 100%. Like, they're very cautious about what they say. But as you said, and we don't need to dig any much further than that, but just that if you're the Ravens, it is a welcome sight to have number 92 on the field wearing a helmet, participating in any capacity, because stating the obvious here, the difference between what their defensive line would be in 2026 with him and without him is stark. Moving on to the next training camp takeaway from day one. Josh, curious your thoughts on this. Obviously, the fan base has had a lot of frustration. Lamar is a 2-time, should be 3-time MVP who has struggled in the playoffs at times. As a team, that the team goes where he goes, and as a collective group, the offense has struggled to get over the hump. On Wednesday, Lamar Jackson is talking about, and he's spent so much of OTAs and minicamp talking about how excited he is for Declan Doyle and Jesse Minter and this new offense and just, this new staff. He's called it a breath of fresh air. He called Declan Doyle a wizard. He had pointed out kind of in passing that Jesse pulled him aside a couple days ago and tried to have, and sort of started this conversation about wanting to spend some time thinking about what they want to do offensively through the lens of the defense. And that he's hoping that can be a regular thing. My mind immediately went to conversations that you and I had when Jesse Minter first got hired. Our listeners might remember, Josh, you and I had spoke to about 10 or 12 folks from Jesse Minter's orbit throughout his coaching career, players who played for him, coaches who coached with him, several people who know Jesse well. And one of the most interesting things that we kept hearing was everyone said the thing that made Jesse such a good defensive-minded coach was that he understood defenses through the lens of the offense. When he was coaching on defense, he loved to spend that extra time learning about the offense to help him prepare for coaching defense. It sounds like, based on what Lamar said, that he's trying to get Lamar to do a little bit more of that. And I had posted that on Twitter, and so many Ravens fans pointed out that Bill Belichick did that a lot for Tom Brady, not drawing comparisons between one of the greatest coach and quarterback duos of all time and Jesse Minter and Lamar Jackson. But it's one of those things that if Lamar was not doing that very much, having a defensive-minded coach be there for Lamar, having Lamar buy into the idea, he said he liked the idea of meeting regularly to have those kinds of conversations, could do wonders for them.
It could do wonders for the entire team, Sam, and certainly on board with a regular meeting between the franchise quarterback and their first-year head coach. And at this point, Lamar has said all the right things, which that is necessarily a guarantee with the subject that is Lamar Jackson, just given his tenure and how his career, all the success he's experienced, and all the other side parts that go with it. Contract talk, something that came up today, which he reiterated he'll maintain his privacy with between himself and Eric DaCosta. As a side note, tough imagining that anything coming together with training camp already here. You think that those talks are pushed into the off season. But just getting back on Lamar Jackson, you mentioned his postseason record. Well, after missing the playoffs completely last year, that is where Lamar Jackson is trying to take them, and that is what the public views this team as. They are the second shortest odds to make the Super Bowl behind the Los Angeles Rams. Lamar Jackson himself, that is really, and I wrote this in a column to open training camp, as Lamar is one of the 10 most Ravens with the most at stake. Lamar, brilliant career. Undoubtedly a Hall of Famer, two-time, would have been three-time, should have been three-time, as you love to point that out, but still a 3-5 postseason record. In the playoff, his passer rating dips to 84.6, well below his NFL all-time career regular season mark of 102.2. So, I mean, as Lamar continues to hopefully enjoy his sustained regular season success, he's having these meetings with Jesse Minter, and let's not forget about Declan Doyle too, who's the magician or the wizard of this entire operation. He expects plenty of explosives. Certainly look forward to chatting with him soon when the Ravens make him available. But again, nothing is a guarantee when it comes to Lamar Jackson, but the fact that he's been involved throughout the offseason at a higher percentage than he has in past years, and the fact that he has praised the new coaching staff, and also taken on the fact that, even before they got here, that he was part of the group that got to know these guys who are now in place, leading the Ravens, leading this offense.
Yeah, we don't need to spend time further speculating about what went wrong with John Harbaugh or Todd Monken or the offense or the entire operation of last year. But as you said, he said all the right things. He seems earnestly and genuinely so excited about what Declan Doyle is doing with this offense, and so genuinely excited about the relationship that he's starting to build with Jesse Minter and the energy that Jesse Minter has brought. I think there is something to the fact that, like, they're both younger guys. They connect a little bit more. They probably see football and the NFL and how they want to play in a closer to, like, in a more similar way to how Lamar, I mean, Zay Flowers said this a lot too, like how they see football and how they want to talk about football compared to the previous regime, who one of the older coaches in the NFL. And, I think, was Tom Monken the oldest OC in the NFL last year, if not the oldest one of. So I think just having some younger energy in the building does mean something to them. But obviously, just again, as Lamar has talked about, a breath of fresh air. But I think that if Lamar can have that time to go that extra mile with Jesse Minter is the one pushing him. Lamar has talked about the way Declan Doyle has been on his ass. And Lamar likes that kind of coaching. He said he hasn't really had that the last few years. It seems like these guys are pushing him in ways, and I think this is sort of the point of this whole conversation, is that it seems like these guys are pushing him in ways that he hasn't been previously pushed. And at the end of the day, that is what when Ravens fans get excited about the things that can get them over the hump, that's the thing they want to hear most.
Man, and as we discuss and really overanalyze all of the surface level observations, the energy, how Lamar is being pushed, let's dive in here. And you got to be a little bit careful, because the Ravens do have rules in place of what we're able to report and what we see throughout practice. But Sam, man, the uptick, and I'll probably say that, say this outright, is that the amount of under center packages that we saw today was probably more than I saw in a single practice last year under the former coaching regime. And can't again dive too much into packages and exact personnel, but a very noticeable uptick in under center, and certainly pre-snap motion at least more at a higher clip than we had seen in past years.
Yeah, and I mean, we're going to get into more about specifics of the offense, but the one other thing I'll say on that note is we saw a lot of misdirection, which, not getting into specifics about what the offense looks like. I think it was fun and interesting to see a little bit more closer eye to than what we saw in minicamp and OTAs, to see the kind of offense that Declan Doyle is going to run. Because I think, guys have said it repeatedly, like it's going to be fun, it's going to be explosive, it's going to be crazy. Anything else you wanna mention about the offense before we turn to the defense?
Yeah, Sam. Rule number 1 of training camp is make sure your laundry is done before training camp.
Rule number 1.
Was that your washer that just went off?
Oh, even better, it was a rice cooker.
Oh, that's awesome. What are you cooking up for tonight? Night one of training camp.
That's an excellent question. I haven't gotten that far. I put it in and closed the rice cooker, started podcasting, and said I'll figure this out in an hour when we're done. I love it. So takeaway number 3 from training camp, Josh. Want to focus on the defense. We heard from Kyle Hamilton. That was the other player who was on podium on Wednesday, and I think the most interesting thing we heard from him, and he was careful to say that this is not any kind of, like, we're not disparaging anything from the previous staff. Kyle Hamilton talked about how they are, quote unquote, unlearning the defense that they had before. He said guys are really getting up to speed at record pace, but unlearning in the sense that, again, this is his words, his acknowledgement that the Ravens, since he's been around and essentially since the days of Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, the last decade plus, the Ravens have ran a very similar style defense. Things have changed very minimally over the years. It's essentially been the same scheme. And now that they hired a defensive-minded, a defensive guru coach coming from the Chargers, he brought that playbook and he brought it east. And this is Jesse Minter's vision. This is Jesse Minter's defense. And it sounds like it's going to be pretty different from what they've done in the past. But with all that in mind, Kyle Hamilton said that Jalen Hawkins is barking out communication as if he's been in this defense his entire life and understanding things really, really quickly. Jalen Hawkins, obviously someone who played in the Super Bowl last year. Kyle Hamilton mentioned how Malachi Starks looks in this system, ready for a big year two jump. That arguably the best safety in the NFL said, there's no reason Malachi Starks can't be the best safety in the NFL. So I think this time of year, players, more specifically us and definitely fans, should be very careful about the expectations you set on a team, considering last year they were Super Bowl favorites at this time and missed the playoffs entirely with a sub 500 record, and the defense was a huge part of those issues. But Kyle Hamilton, and I think this was the most interesting part, was he wasn't saying, hey, we're coming into this year and we have all the pieces in place as they'd said last year. We're going to hit the ground running, as they'd said last year. We're going to be feared again, as they'd said last year. He said, we're going to crescendo throughout the year. Great word. We're going to crescendo throughout the year, basically implying what has been Jesse Minter's motto, which is that they will be at their best when their best is needed late in the year. So it was interesting to just kind of hear a little bit of shift in the way they talk about the defense. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I thought you asked one of the most important questions of Jesse Minter's first training camp media session availability. And, word for word, what you asked is particularly with the defense, where do you hope to make the biggest strides? And then, again, just alluding to all of the failures and all of the disappointments from last season. And Jesse's first, the words that came out of his mouth, his very first go-to is exactly like what I would have imagined the coach that Jesse Minter is his response. And here was his exact response to you. It's the first day and you're trying to communicate, you're trying to be on the same page when the balls snap. And then he goes on to further discuss execution and the playbook, but the fact that he just starts with communicating and being on the same page when the balls snap, because there were so many instances, even in week 18 of a do or die game, to go home or to go to the playoffs, where we saw this defense was not on the same page. And of course, Kyle Hamilton, which he actually discussed today when asked by Jonas Schaefer from the Banner about his absence in the second half of that game and how that contributed to their eventual fate of not making the playoffs and Tyler Loop's miss. And essentially it goes back to Jesse Minter's answer. No matter who's on the field, if Kyle Hamilton's off the field, if Roquan Smith is not on the field, if Nnamdi Madubuike is not on the field, communication is key and everyone has to be on the same page. So that's really, again, what we're going to be looking for on a day-to-day basis is how connected is this defense? Is the front end playing with the back end? Is the front end playing as a unit? Is the back end playing as a unit? Those are all observations that we will continue to assess as Jesse Minter tries to press the reset button firmly on this defense and make his imprint.
And some of that is so much easier said than done, because let's not kid ourselves. Like, you're not replacing Kyle Hamilton in the aggregate on a defense in week 18 where your season's on the line. Like, it's just not that simple. He is a singular force on defense. He is repeatedly called the chess piece. I feel like we're close to that just becoming his nickname. You can't just replace that. But the thing it comes back to, and you said it there, is that if he's gone, does the communication fall off in any meaningful way? Because when it does, that's where your defense is going to crumble and completely fall apart. I mean, he has at times worn the red dot. He's been, Roquan Smith generally is the play caller on defense, but Kyle Hamilton is so much of the kind of overseer of what they're doing, playing that free safety at times. Sometimes he's playing close to the line of scrimmage, but he knows everything. He knows where everyone is supposed to be. Having someone like him off the field can really, really hurt you. And we saw that to a T near the end of last season. Kyle Hamilton is not really someone they could afford to lose. So with certain levels of communication and scheme, like you can survive at short periods without someone like him or Roquan Smith or whomever else. But you need those guys, and even he knocked on wood to hope for some good health. But that is a huge part of like what they're doing now is the communication part. Jesse Minter kind of giving little bites of the apple, a piece at a time, knowing that this whole defense is new, this whole scheme is new, everything they're trying is relatively new to a lot of these guys. He's not trying to put too much on their plate at once, and that was Kyle Hamilton's biggest praise for Jesse Minter as they're learning, and that's kind of why he feels like they're going to crescendo into a really, really good defense because they're learning quickly, but more is coming. And I think that's a big part of like their ability to be successful is managing those kinds of expectations. You get humbled in 2025, understand where you're at and where you need to be in 2026. And I don't know if you noticed this too, Josh. Felt like there was a lot less talk about the SB word on day one of training camp. Everyone's thinking about it now. There wasn't a lot of talk about the Super Bowl.
Yeah, definitely. And, Jesse Minter, he dismissed the question ultimately, back to that day-to-day focus. And, Sam, I'm going to compliment you here one more time is that you asked
Please.
one of the best questions in Jesse Minter's
Very
press
sweet
conference,
of you.
but also Kyle Hamilton. And, we're walking back a little bit of what you just said, but for perspective, you
I asked him
mentioned
about
that he wasn't.
LeBron going to the Sixers.
we could only wish as Kyle Hamilton drops
Big LeBron
himself
guy.
in that
Yeah,
in that
sorry. Go
jersey.
ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
big LeBron guy. But no, so your question to him was talking about if he was surprised working with Jesse Minter or Anthony Weaver and how quickly some of the things have gone together. And his answer was very eye-opening. And I think he caught himself at the end and stated what you just referenced of, this isn't a diss to John Harbaugh or any other coaches, but this was the very first part of his long answer to you. He said, yes, there's been no abrasion or kind of friction between players and coaches with installing new stuff and kind of unlearning old stuff that we've had. So that's the end quote. And that's the full quote of the unlearning process. But the fact that, his first go-to thought was, there's been no friction, no abrasion. Well, at some point there must have been. And then again, later on, he says, this is not to, diss again, in my own words, diss the former staff. But again, the fact that was the first thing that came to his mind does show that some type of element of friction, of abrasion did exist in the past. And, we're not here to speculate further. We're here to move on with this coaching staff that is in place. And it started again with the two leaders of both units today, Lamar Jackson and Kyle Hamilton, speaking with the media, and our own Sam Cohn, early bird Sam Cohn, asking great questions to both Jesse Minter and Kyle.
You're too kind. And even though, going back just one more point on that unlearning part, like Kyle had said that it felt like the new staff was very receptive to having conversations about what the defense has looked like or can be. Again, not saying anything about the previous staff, but that the point being that he kind of expected a new coach to come in and be like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're going to run, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it. And he said that the new staff, Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator, Jesse Minter, the whole staff has been pretty receptive to having those kinds of conversations. You want to run through some superlatives?
Yeah, let's get to it. So, training camp superlatives. Let's play the awards game, and let's have some fun with it. So, again, we've witnessed exactly all of one training camp practice, but let's make some bold
Yeah, we're very
predictions.
early for doing this kind of thing, but I love it anyway.
Yeah, no, let's have fun for the exercise, and heck, we'll even revisit it at the end of training camp to see who really actually should be the recipient of these awards. But let's go again. Training camp day one. Who is the Raven with the most to prove, Sam? I actually wrote a column on this today with 10 guys. I'm asking you to pick one, and I'll give you one. Who has the most to prove on this roster?
I'm going with Rashad Bateman. We've heard Eric DeCosta, among others, say they feel like this is a chance for him to have a bounce back year. He is the oldest wide receiver in that room. He showed 2 years ago what he can provide offensively. He scored, I think, 9 touchdowns. He was a major part of the success of that offense. He was lost in the offense last year. they had a lot of guys to throw to, but Rashad Bateman was completely out of it. And I think they feel confident that he can have a bounce back year. But when I look at that passing core, doesn't inspire so much confidence just because there aren't a lot of guys who have done things at a high level in the NFL. Rashad Bateman is one of the very few among the wide receiver group. Obviously, Zay Flowers has proven himself. They just bring in Chris Moore, the veteran wide receiver. So, but among the wide receivers, Rashad Bateman is one of the only ones who's again the oldest and has shown what he can do in the league. So. I'm going with Rashad Bateman for most to prove. I think he really needs a big year, especially because they signed him to a contract extension before 2025.
Yeah, that's a good pick. And you, again, look disinterested along the way last year. 19 catches, only 224 yards, 2 touchdowns. On one of them, he was wide open. So that's a really good pick. My pick, Sam, is going to be Marlon Humphrey, who still had some game-changing moments last season between a couple forced fumbles, had I think 3 or 4 interceptions, but man, on the other end, it was really, really brutal. Career high 909 yards when targeted in pass coverage, according to PFF. And even after the Ravens' Week 18 loss to Pittsburgh, Marlon Humphrey himself acknowledged if he was he did not know his standing amongst the front office, amongst Eric DeCosta. Yeah. And if he was going to be here next season, he'd know if he was saying goodbye. And then clearly, Eric DeCosta, he reaffirmed his trust and what he thought of Marlon Humphrey during the offseason, including speaking about him at the NFL Combine. And here is Marlon Humphrey back for the final season of his contract. He's the longest tenured player on the team, obviously the oldest defensive back in the room. And still, when you think of Marlon Humphrey, you think of game-changing plays throughout his tenure here as a Raven. And while he, again, had some of those throughout the course of last season, battled a hand injury, and again, ultimately gave up the most yards he's ever given up in his entire football career. So Marlon Humphrey is my guy with the most to prove. Definitely a good sign that he's healthy in here for the start of training camp. As you know, when you're a veteran nowadays, you're not always at the off-season workouts as Marlon was. He's traveling the world.
In South Korea, I feel like for most of the based on the social media, spent a lot of time in South Korea.
Yeah, go ahead and look at his Instagram for further discourse there. Maybe getting some podcast fodder for himself. But all right, we're going with Rashad Bateman and Marlon Humphrey with the most to prove. Next up, we have training camp darling. And this is, the rules in place for this pick is that you're not necessarily like a proven name. It's okay if you've been here for a while, but you're really going to step up this summer in this training camp and essentially prove that your spot is here to stay for this upcoming season. Who do you have as your training camp darling, Sam?
The rules for the early bird superlatives are that there are no rules and we made this up. So we are allowed to have fun with it. Last year, the training camp darling consensus would say it was Ruben Lowry, one of the UDFAs, and that's another one of our superlatives we'll get to. Neither of us went with the UDFA. I think it's entirely possible that there's an undrafted rookie who shows out in camp, has a great couple weeks, and that's the person everyone wants to talk about. But we both went with guys who fringe to definitely going to make, almost definitely to going to make the roster or whatever, just further down the depth chart guys, but both kind of ready to step into seasons where they can break out. I went with Tez Walker. I kind of hate that I went with 2 wide receivers for the first 2 questions here, but I think in 2-3 weeks, we're going to be looking at like who's had a really good camp, who's been doing some stuff, who's been standing out. Everyone keeps saying Tez Walker is primed to have a big year. We have only seen him really catch touchdowns. We haven't seen him do a whole lot else, but with how wide open that wide receiver room is, I think there's plenty of room for Tez Walker to see a spot, go take it, become a big part of this offense. So I'm willing to plant my flag right now. I'm willing to buy in to what everyone on the inside is saying that Tez Walker seems ready in year 3 to have a big year.
Not mad at the pick, and actually now that you're pointing out that you picked 2 wide receivers, I'm kind of disappointed in myself for picking 2 defensive backs because I'm going with another DB. And actually, they all make sense, but here we go with TJ Tampa. He's my training camp darling. I think we've seen flashes of TJ Tampa, who was originally a 2024 4th round pick out of Iowa State, I believe. So, man, just dissecting TJ Tampa as a player on the field. He's the second tallest defensive back on the roster. Throughout the offseason, he's had some quality snaps and opportunity with Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins. They were not practicing. I saw him flash throughout those offseason workouts and those voluntary workouts. Can he seize this opportunity? You know, a lot of his run still is primarily going to involve backups and running with that second string. But we have seen Jesse Minter, and Matt and I talked pretty extensively about this topic on our last episode. But Jesse Minter's usage of defensive backs, when you look at Michigan and the Los Angeles Chargers, the two most recent stops that he has been, he is not afraid of benching his star cornerbacks, and for the sake of longevity and for the usage of to maximize the talent of the entire room. So guys like TJ Tampa, who has a very long frame, recorded his first interception, albeit in garbage time last season, an opportunity again for TJ Tampa to step up. And you know, can he carry over that momentum that he established during offseason and voluntary workouts? That is the question. And if he does, then he's my pick for training camp darling.
That plus they love him on special teams. He's someone who's been able to contribute on special teams. I think each of the last 2 seasons, he's seen some run at DB. We've seen him. He probably leads the team in practice interceptions. I think it's a matter of when he sees those reps that he can make a difference, and rather than if. So I mentioned our UDFA's favorite undrafted rookie to make the 53-man roster. 20 of the past 21 seasons, I believe, is the number. The Ravens have had at least one. Last year, there were 3. Keon Martin, DB, Ruben Lowry, safety, and Jay Higgins at linebacker. So much of this, of course, depends on the player's ability to show out in camp. Some of it also has to do with positional depth. If it's up to the Ravens, I think they'd love to have 51, 52 guys that they're like, yes, this is our roster, and then let the scouting department and let the folks who spend a lot of time finding these guys look over what they've done in camp and give that 53rd spot to an undrafted rookie because they've had success. We should also mention Keandre Jackson was an undrafted rookie who got called up, made on the team as a practice squad, and then got elevated to the 53-man roster and hugely helped the Ravens on special teams. Had a forced fumble, several tackles. I mean, he was great for them last year. So it's kind of a guessing game after one day of training camp. But Josh, I'll let you go first on this one. UDFA to make the roster.
Yeah, and let's also point out 2 of those 3 guys, Keon Martin and Jay Higgins, are still on the roster. Ruben Lowry recently retired. He was with the Colts, and Keandre Jackson's still with the roster. So these are guys who, continue to make an impact and fight their way for their spot on the team. My pick for UDFA to make the roster, and let's say this could change, over the next couple of weeks, but let's go with one of the best names on the roster, and that is Diego Pounds. Diego Pounds, a 6'6", 325-pound. They have him listed as an offensive tackle. So you just look at that position group, and this is a bit away from the ideal makeup of a UDFA profile to make the roster, which is through their opportunity and participation and making impact on special teams. Like a lot of those guys listed were defensive backs or linebackers. So that treads away from that thought. But the thought here is that we're looking at an offensive tackle group that features Roger Rosengardner there at right tackle, Ronnie Stanley at left, and then you've got Carson Vincent as a depth option. He was a day 3 pick from last year, like another guy in non-padded form throughout offseason workouts. He was the de facto guy there working out at those starter spots. And then recently added 7th-year Hakeem Adeniji is part of that group. So can Diego Pounds separate himself? You look at his highlight film throughout college, a lot of it involves power and just playing with straight raw power. He'll overcome some mistakes or missteps or if he's beat to the punch with just raw power. So can that power translate to the NFL, and can his learning skills under Dwayne Ledford, their new offensive coach, can that be up to speed for him to fight for a roster spot? Certainly one, in my opinion, worth paying attention to at offensive tackle.
For sure. For mine, I'm going to go with Ladarius Webb. I say this in part because I think having the son of a Raven, like being the son of a Raven, of someone who is well respected, played for the organization, does go a long way. I also think that, if you can have a good camp, he's in the mix. But it's sort of an interesting position group, right? Because there's probably one, two, maybe three spots up for grabs, depending on how things shake out. But the bottom of that depth chart to make the team, the guys fighting for that group are two guys who had major knee injuries this time last year in Robert Longerbeam and Bilal Kone, two 2025 day 3 draft picks. TJ Tampa kind of in that group. Keon Martin, who we mentioned, kind of in that group. I think if Ladarius Webb can is anything like his father, then perhaps he can he can be in that mix and usurp one of those day 3 draft picks from last year and at least put his name in the mix to make the roster. I think it's at least an interesting name to watch out for over these next couple weeks.
Man, I like the pick, and specifically with the position group there as well. He fits the mold, and feel good story too. I recall correctly, Brian Wacker, our colleague here at the Baltimore Sun, he was the one to break that news with him joining the Ravens. So
Yeah,
two
I'm
guys to
missing
pay attention to.
definitely. I'm missing Chandler Rivers was the other cornerback in that group. Another day 3
Mhm.
pick in the mix there. So again, like it could get crowded, but as we talked about early on in this podcast, and as Eric DaCosta has said before, cornerbacks are like sports cars. They break down. There is almost very likely, knock on wood, because we're not praying for this or thinking or hoping any of this happens, but like reasonably, it's likely and expected that one or two of these guys might sustain some kind of injury, and that could whittle down a little bit of that group. So just kind of depends on how things shake out health wise and what these guys are able to do over the next few weeks in camp. We're going to wrap with offensive and defensive MVPs. Josh, I think our offensive MVPs kind of speak for themselves.
Yep, I'm going with Zay Flowers. It is money time for Zay Flowers, who is currently eligible to sign his first contract extension for the first time in his entire career. You got to imagine that Eric DaCosta and his representatives are constantly right now at the table, the bargaining table, the negotiating table, to come to an agreement here for Zay before the start of the season. While he might not pose the ideal X threat, big body threat, he has undoubtedly been one of the team's biggest offensive contributors. He made, you think of highlights from today. It was day 1 of camp, so some might be few or far between, or you might be over analyzing each one. But in my opinion, Zay came down with 2 highlight grabs, both chunk gains. Lamar Jackson just absolutely always trust him, and that relationship extends into the offseason. Throughout the offseason, they've been training in South Florida with Zay Flowers' personal trainer Tevin Allen, who runs Gold Fleet Global World training focused specifically for wide receivers, defensive backs, but he does it all. And that relationship again between Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers has flourished over the years. So go ahead and give me Zay Flowers. I don't want to wonder too much on who your offensive MVP will be.
Keep it simple. I'm going with Lamar, a healthy Lamar Jackson coming off a down year. I think he's going to be back with a vengeance. I think he's going to thrive with whatever else we learn about this Declan Doyle offense. I think it's going to be really interesting to see, can he get the most out of his receiving core? Can he get a lot of these guys in the mix? The offensive line. If you're a Ravens fan, you're hoping this offensive line is not just a little bit better, but a lot better, and he can be protected a little bit. So some new offensive line, new guys to throw the ball to, and a new offensive scheme. Lamar coming off a down year. It's just hard not to see this being a chance for Lamar to really show something before he signs a contract extension. Potentially signs a contract extension.
Do you think he got faster?
I don't. Kyle Hamilton said today that he felt like Lamar got faster.
I think he got faster from his pre-injured or his injured self from last year.
Yes,
So
yeah. From
any
what we
version of
saw,
Lamar Jackson is going to look faster than last year when he missed 4 games with hamstring and back injuries.
Yes, and the times that we did see Lamar, obviously that was such a huge talking point last year of whether he was playing hurt. He would never admit that. Do I think he got faster? Probably not, but I think he, as you said, faster than he was when he was perhaps playing hurt. For defensive MVP, Josh, you have TBA. Does that mean that when we started recording, you had not thought of someone yet, or does that mean you were waiting to see another one or two practices before you feel like you're willing to stamp an answer?
No, it was the former, and I actually was going to join your answer, but I don't. I wanted, I wanted to be a little bit more creative than just hopping on your answer, which I won't reveal at this time. But within the same position group, I am going with Trey Hendrickson, another money man. You go out and sign him to a 4-year contract worth $112 million, man. I think that says it there. He has to be an impact player, if not playing at an MVP level. And we've wrote about this pretty extensively. We've dove into his performance on our Early Birds podcast in previous episodes when they went ahead and added him throughout the offseason. But man, a lot of his best performances and a lot of his sack numbers come late in the game. And that is when the Ravens have shown where they've been susceptible to blowing leads and just being beat to the punch in the fourth quarter. Trey Hendrickson, Jesse Minter, he loves that saying, be at your best when your best is needed. Well, Trey Hendrickson has had a career where he's exemplified that saying, and now he's got to continue to bring it here to Baltimore. And I will say, it is tough to judge out of all the position groups that we watch throughout training camp practices, one of the toughest to judge is O-line, D-line. You certainly see who wins at the outset, off the whistle, but no one is going to touch Lamar Jackson, not even Lamar Jackson, but any quarterback at that, because of all the protective measures in place. So guys can't really record sacks. They can't record quarterback hits. They can't interrupt passes. It's like when you get within a few feet, you got to stop running. But Sam, there were at least 3 instances today, including the late Lamar pass to Rashad Bateman on the left sideline, where Rashad tries to make a leaping grab, ultimately does not make that catch. But in a real game, that is a sack for Trey Hendrickson. He was back there in a flash like that. So Trey Hendrickson, he has flashed for me. And again, it's time for you to reveal your pick. So someone who was also flashed in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, similar thing from what he was able to do just in the first day of training camp. I think Mike Green is ready for a year 2 jump. He is someone who, when they drafted, he was said to be a round 1 a first round talent who they were able to get in the second round. And I think he has shown, enough guys have said, I think we saw the direction he was trending toward late last year. He looked really sharp. He was flying all over the field on Wednesday. He, same as you were saying with Trey Hendrickson, like he was in the backfield a lot. He was beating his guys at the point of attack. I think Mike Green, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be saying, like, I had said maybe a couple of weeks ago, like Zion Young is someone I'm really excited to see from that edge group, just because he's such a power rusher, a guy that can out physical, out muscle, offensive lineman. I do think that we're going to see positive signs from Zion Young, and that whole edge group is certainly a point of interest. Obviously, they were at the bottom of the league last year and have a chance to be really, really good this year. If they're going to be really, really good this year, it is the 2 guys we just mentioned. It's Trey Hendrickson and it's Mike Green. It's Trey Hendrickson still being really good post-surgery, and it's Mike Green taking a year 2 jump, and Jesse Minter putting them schematically in the right places, putting those guys in positions to succeed, and them not doing it in camp, but come, once the bullets start flying, be able to bring down the quarterback.
There you have it. Our defensive MVPs, both edge rushers, certainly edge rushers, anyone across that defensive line, they're going to have to make an impact after recording just 30 sacks, the 3rd fewest in the NFL last season. Sam, do you have any other observations or general thoughts from our first training camp practice? Christmas is here for the next 6 weeks.
Yeah, here's the one I'll give based off first glance of this team. Ethan Posick, we got to figure out how to say his name correctly. Posick, the veteran center they signed from Cleveland. That is a large dude. That is a large center. That's a large man.
Yep.
Presumably the front runner in that center competition too. You have that 3-horse race becomes a 4-horse race, and he's presumably at the front of the group.
That's a great ob, because you look at Tyler Linderbaum, he's 6'2". You got Danny Pinner in there right now, who's starting camp as the starter, but that's also, you got to factor in Ethan Posick injury situation last year, coming off a major injury. He is 6'4", Danny Pinner is, and then Ethan Pocic at 6'6". So it goes
Yeah.
2 inch increments from the guy that Lamar Jackson is so used to receiving the football from, as Tyler Linderbaum embarks on a new chapter down there in Las Vegas. He gets a new partners in crimes with Ethan Pocic and Danny Pinner. And I asked Lamar about that, and he said their attitude has been great. He said he wants to see how their body moves. I also thought that was a pretty transparent answer from Lamar. He didn't just praise them, but he says, again, he had to tame it down a bit. We're in pads. I want to see how their body moves once those padded practices start. So you got to imagine that the guy with 97 career starts has a lead in that competition despite his rehab and injury situation.
One would certainly think, and over the next couple weeks, obviously, we'll spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about how these storylines evolve and where this team is at. The next episode of the Early Birds will be on Tuesday. Programming note, we're pushing back one day. That'll be a recap from Matt and one of us. I'm not sure we've decided on that yet, but one of us will join Matt after the MLB trade deadline, which is on Monday, August 3rd. So get super excited for that. Josh, any final words for the good people, as Matt likes to say?
Yeah, I will add that at some point before the conclusion of training camp, and I don't know if this is like an actual physical activity that I'll attempt, and I obviously don't know what it is. But I don't know if you caught this, Sam, but Lamar Jackson going 360 on a pump fake before scrambling off to his
I
right.
saw that. He rolled out to his right and twirled, and he probably would have gotten sacked, and then he kept going, and that was one of the plays that stuck out of my head where Mike Green was chasing him down the sideline, but obviously can't touch him, and Lamar went up the
Yes.
sideline. That was funny.
Yeah, but before that, before he tried to cut up field, 360 pump fake. And I know you've watched Lamar up close a few more years than myself, but man, just you can't, I don't. Patrick Mahomes, I mean, not right now, not this version of Patrick Mahomes, but not many quarterbacks in the NFL are even attempting that in the practice setting. The fact that we get to watch Lamar Jackson every day for the next however many months into January is a big blessing for myself. It's just a one-on-one quarterback in his own right of all of his accomplishments, but the fact that he's able to do something that physically difficult in my mind, I got to try to do something crazy here over the next few weeks leading up to the regular season.
We're going to have some fun, and we're going to have fun chronicling the whole thing. To our listeners, thank you so much. Everyone watching on YouTube, appreciate you following along with Early Birds Podcast. Until next time.